Many people seem to think that C.S. Lewis embraced modern evolutionary theory wholesale, and that he was perfectly happy with it, thought it was consistent with Christianity, and believed in it. And I've read a lot of things by people who seem to say that. The interesting thing is, if you actually read Lewis, both his public writings and his private writings, is he was really rather skeptical of many claims made in the name of evolution. And he became even more skeptical the older he got. And so by the end of his life, he was really skeptical. And so Lewis really was not someone who just wholesale endorsed modern evolutionary theory. And I think to sort of see this, we need to look at two particular aspects of evolution that Lewis thought about and wrote about. First is the idea of common ancestry, the idea that everything that lives, including human beings, basically originated as a descendant with modification from one original ancestor. Now, Lewis did not have a theological objection to common ancestry. He thought God could have used pre-human animals to create particularly the physical aspects of human beings. Now, that doesn't mean he thought that God did do that. Actually, if you read his especially private writings and correspondence, he was heavily skeptical of that idea and got really skeptical later in life, in the last few years of his life. It's also the case that the type of common ancestry that Lewis thought could fit with Christianity is not the type of common ancestry that really modern evolutionary theory teaches. One, Lewis thought that the original human beings did have to be morally innocent, and that there was a real fall in nature, and that had consequences. And many people who call themselves theistic evolutionists, this is a real problem for them. They regard the fall as a myth, and actually think that, if anything, it was a fall upward, that we were sinful and evil to begin with because evolution is based on selfishness and based on the struggle for survival, and that somehow through self-awareness we later became aware of God. Well, that doesn't fit the biblical account at all, and Lewis said that the type of common ancestry he was willing to accept wouldn't accept that. That, in fact, you would have to have the first humans be genuinely in moral fellowship with God, and then make a choice to basically turn away from God, and then there are all sorts of repercussions for that. Lewis also insisted, pretty much in his private life at least, that he believed in a historic Adam and Eve. Now, he did actually say in some of the things he wrote publicly that he wouldn't insist on that theologically, but he privately did believe in a historic Adam and Eve, at least from his private correspondence, and from his own fictional books and the way he wrote about it. It's pretty clear that he did believe in a historic Adam and Eve. And then he also was very clear that an evolutionary process, particularly a materialistic evolutionary process, a mindless process, could not explain the development of the human mind and human morality. And again, that's something that modern evolutionary theory claims to explain. And so although Lewis did say that he thought Christians could believe in a type of common ancestry, he sharply limited what he meant by common ancestry. So that's one main evolutionary claim. But the other one is really the more particularly Darwinian claim. It's that the process of evolution, the thing that brought about you and me and everything in nature, was a blind and unguided process. The whole thing about natural selection, according to Darwin, is that it can mimic an intelligent designer without actually needing a designer at all. That if you just have survival plus these random variations in nature, that you could create everything, build everything without the need for intentional design. Lewis, even from the time before he was a Christian, during World War I, while he was still an atheist and agnostic, thought that natural selection couldn't do all those things. It just didn't make any sense, and the evidence didn't show it. And certainly after he became a Christian, he became even more skeptical of natural selection. Now, he thought it could do things like knock out things and make things less complicated, but he was very skeptical of the idea that Darwinian natural selection, an unguided process, could build new form and function. And so he was very clear on that. And so, Lewis did think, again, that there could be a type of common ancestry that a Christian could believe if you really sharply defined it in a way that modern evolutionists wouldn't find acceptable. But then when it came to natural selection as an unguided process, he was sharply critical of that, just on evidentiary grounds, even before he was a Christian. And then, of course, as a Christian, if you believe that God is sovereign, then there are a whole realm of other problems with that.